Welcome to EV Pulse Weekly. We've got two big stories to cover today. One, Chad just drove the new Nissan Ariya all-electric SUV. We'll get the lowdown from him on this highly anticipated EV. And two, Honda just released images of its upcoming Prologue SUV, and it almost looks like a Range Rover, at least to my eye. We'll cover these breaking stories, plus we've got another super helpful EV tip of the week. So make sure you stick around for that and a whole lot more in this episode of EV Pulse Weekly. Hello and welcome to the show. I am Senior Editor Craig Cole, and of course, joining me once again is boss man Chad Kirchner. Chad, you just got back from Nashville. Did you get yourself some new cowboy boots?
Nope, but I did get a cowboy hat and some hot chicken. No, I didn't actually. I didn't get hot chicken either. I didn't get any hot chicken either. So why did I go to Nashville? Other than to drive cars, apparently. But my flight was not delayed enough. Some of our colleagues went and got some hot chicken, but I did not. So
enjoyed the Delta difference then.
I had my flight was on time. They tried to pay me $700 to not come home last night, though, which I almost took them up on.
That's getting up there. That's an almost I would wait longer amount.
Yeah, but then I'd have to go to Atlanta, and then I'd have to get stranded in Atlanta, and then I'd have to call our friend Eileen, and then she would say, "No, you can't stay with me," and then I'd have to sleep on the floor, and it would have been all of it an ordeal. So,
but $700,
$700, yeah, and some Delta credit that I may or may not use. So
yeah,
but Nashville. Exciting times indeed.
You drove a car, a new one too.
I drove a car that I have been waiting an extremely long time.
Literally years.
Literally years, which is the 2023 Nissan Ariya, which is the company's newest next generation, built from the ground up on a new platform, electric vehicle.
So this isn't a Rogue that they fancied up.
This is not a fancy
This isn't
Rogue.
A Pathfinder that they shortened.
Nope. It has the wheelbase of the Murano. I'm sorry, I forgot that vehicle because I don't think they even really build it anymore. But it has the wheelbase of it has the wheelbase of the Murano, but it's actually shorter in length than the Rogue. So what they've been able to do is, and it doesn't have a front trunk, so they've done this, but they were able to move the wheels all the way out to the outside of the car to maximize interior space, both in the rear for storage and then in the cabin. So it's the new Nissan, and I think, starting sort of like with looks, I think it's a really attractive vehicle. I like the sort of Nissan V waterfall sort of trim thing they have going on up front with the fake grille. I like the narrow LED headlights. I like the vehicle in profile. I like that that swoopy sort of look. I don't care for it in that copper color. The one I spent most of my time in was blue, which I find much more attractive.
You don't like the copper because copper is like the signature color, right?
It is their flagship color. It's their launch color. And on the copper vehicles, especially in the higher trim levels, the wheels come with little copper colored inserts on the aluminum wheels too. I'm sure some people look at it and think that it's great, but at the end of the day, it looks fine, but it's not my color. But
that's fine. I think the copper looks great. I have not seen it in person, of course, but in photos at least, it looks very nice. Very short overhangs on the vehicle. That goes to your point of pushing the wheels to each end, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, like I said, it has the wheelbase of a Murano, which is their much larger crossover. Not quite Pathfinder, but in the crossover space. Yeah. So what they do is they give you a decent amount of rear leg room. I would compare it almost as comparably to like the EV6 or the Ioniq 5. I'd have to actually look at the specs, but eyeballing it up, it looks very similar. And then rear storage space, I think Nissan does some really clever things in the back of the car to maximize storage. So they've got this new multi-partitioned floor that you can kind of do like a bin storage area in the back for like putting groceries in or hiding stuff.
Is that like the divide and hide? I think they had that on the Rogue.
Yeah, so
super clever.
Yeah, so because my shtick these days is EVs. This is the first Nissan.
Is that what we do?
It is. Okay. You came from a publication though that covered more than EVs.
Yes.
So, so this is my first time experience this divide and hide system, and I think it's really clever.
Yeah.
So the decent amount of space in the car, it's really nice. It feels inside like what an Infiniti should be. And while nobody at Nissan will like say this, if I were to guess, and this is only speculation, if I were to guess, this car was supposed to be an Infiniti.
Interesting. I mean, you mentioned it's funny you mentioned Infiniti because that's a brand. It's like, yeah, are they still around? Do they still make cars? They do, but I can't really recommend any of
They're
them,
not really modern these
unfortunately.
days. Yeah, no, and this is unfortunate because I think they've done some really cool stuff in the past,
Mm-hmm.
unique design stuff like that. So I would be willing to bet this car was originally supposed to be badged as an Infiniti because all the materials inside are really premium, like Murano Plus. Because I always thought the
Mm-hmm.
Murano was nice inside. This feels a lot like Murano Plus. So in most of the trims, it's all vegan kind of stuff. You can actually get real leather on a top spec trim if you want it, which their product planning says is the only available, like the only vehicle in its class available that way.
Mm-hmm.
They're really focused on trying to win over converts. So some of the changes, like, okay, we'll give you a real leather interior if you want it. We will rechange how one pedal driving works, and we won't give you true one pedal because we don't want it to feel awkward to people that are coming in. I'll
There's
get into it.
not a true one pedal. It won't roll to a stop.
No, so even in B mode with the smart pedal thing that it has, I forget exactly what they call it, E something. It doesn't bring it to a full stop, so you still have to
So
use
you
the
have to have
brakes.
the manual brake hold button, like the BZ4X has that. It's an
Yeah,
aggressive
see,
regen, but it will not stop itself.
correct. Yeah, you got to put your foot on the
Weird.
brakes. Yeah,
Weird choice.
which because Leaf has a one pedal that I like a lot.
Yeah.
So, and when asked, they're like, "Well, we're trying to get a more comfortable experience for somebody coming over from a gas car," which
That's
I
a
understand.
ridiculous answer though, because you can just turn one pedal on or off.
Right, you can put it in
Right?
you can put it in software, and
Yeah.
like the German car, or not the German cars, but sorry, the Korean cars,
Mm-hmm.
like multiple stages of regen.
Yeah.
So it's doable. They didn't do it. Why? Whatever.
Mm-hmm. Deal with it, basically.
Deal with it.
It's fine. It's
Yeah,
not that
deal
big a
with
deal.
You're right. And it really, I mean, it really isn't. But it is a noticeable difference if you're coming from, let's say, a Leaf. The interior also, there's no center console up front, like in the traditional sense, a lot like the Ioniq 5. But there is an armrest that has some controls on it,
Mm-hmm.
a lot like the iX, the BMW iX. And it
Mm-hmm.
also power slides forward and backwards. So you can adjust it to sort of where you want your interior or where you want your armrest at. And there's even a secret power operated, like James Bond style gun holder. I mean, it's not a gun holder, but it looks like where
It could be. You could pack some heat in
you
there,
can
right?
put it.
You're talking about on the dashboard, that little like cubby that
That
sort of
slide. Yeah, that
motors
slide
down.
pops up. Yeah,
That is a very cool feature.
it
That's
is.
very cool.
You actually and learning more about it is it's even cooler than I thought. You have to have the ignition on to use it.
Oh.
So if you're handing the car, like if you're locking it or if you're leaving it somewhere, maybe the car is unlocked or you want sort of that extra, like you have to have the keys to the car to open that. You can't just open it. So it's a good place for your Walther PPK. It has the updated infotainment system that Nissan's using sort of across its line. Some clever things it's doing there is it will support dynamic route planning, so you can put a destination in either on the Nissan connected app on your phone or in the car, and it'll route you automatically to charging stations. It'll automatically precondition the battery as you approach. It does all of the Tesla thingies that really every modern EV should be doing. Yet not every modern EV does it. So it's doing some real clever stuff there. What else? It has a really actually big highlight is it is available with a Pro Pilot Assist 2. So it's their level 2 ADAS, but it's hands off. So it's Blue Cruise or Super Cruise. It will do automatic lane changing. You have to ask it to do it.
You signaled for it to do that, which is what I think Ford is just updating their Blue Cruise to do the same thing, right?
Yeah. It'll if you're coming up on traffic, it'll say, "Do you want to change lanes?" And you can confirm it, or you can ask for it yourself. You have to actually touch the steering wheel to do the lane change, which is how Ioniq Highway Drive Assist 2 works, but you always have to have your hand on the steering wheel in the
Yes.
Ioniq or in the Kia.
Yeah.
This you don't. But what's interesting and why I think it is actually kind of intuitive is they have a in addition to the cameras watching your eyes, it has a touch sensor in the steering wheel. So it's not using the
So it
torque
knows
sensor.
it's not a torque base, so you don't
Right.
have to turn the wheel a little bit,
Yeah.
so it knows you've
Right.
got your hands on the wheel.
And in the Ioniq, like you go to do a lane change and you got to put some torque on the steering wheel. It's like, why not just do the lane change yourself? Like, what's the point?
Exactly, right?
Do we have a
there,
problem?
but it's kind of useless.
Yeah. This actually is pretty intuitive. And honestly, it feels better than the last Blue Cruise that I drove. It doesn't seem to false as much. Lane changes are nice and smooth. It's really clever. It's not as good as Super Cruise, the updated Super Cruise.
Nothing is,
but it's pretty close. And in the way that it shows you in the heads-up display and stuff there's different colors for what mode you're in. It's similar to what Super Cruise does on the steering wheel. They don't do it on the steering wheel though, but
it's in the cluster. Then, like the warnings, like
it's in the cluster, it's in the heads-up display, and then especially at night, the interior trim light, the LED trim lights that run around the front of the vehicle, in the interior, those accent lights will also reflect the color for the drive mode. Gotcha. So a bunch of redundancy, so you know what drive mode is in, but it works.
But it overall works very. You're saying
it works really well. I mean, you have to be on divided highways. You have to be on these mapped highways to do it. But really, I was actually really impressed. Same
basic requirements as Blue Cruise or Super Cruise. Then
yes, but for a first gen hands-off product, yes, they've had it in Japan for a while, but it's at lower speeds. This will work at any. I mean, I don't know what the top speed is, but I had it set at 80 miles an hour and it worked perfectly fine. So, so really fantastic. I really liked that. And it's something that kind of differentiates from, some of the competitors that are out there.
Absolutely. The EGMP cars don't have a hands-off solution. I mean, Highway Driving Assist or Highway Driving Assist 2 is basically 98% there, but it's still not technically a hands-off system.
Yeah, because it doesn't have it doesn't have the driver monitoring.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
This Nissan does. So, gosh, it's a really solid car. Like especially if there were no EGMP cars, this would be top 3 for sure.
Oh, wow.
Top 2 on what's on sale.
I wanted to ask you about the specs, but before
we have to get to that.
I wanted to ask you the trim on the dashboard. I believe it's a fake wood, but they have the climate controls that sort of shine through that trim.
Yeah.
How well does that work, and does it look good, or does it feel cheap?
So it looks good.
Okay.
I will say that it looks good, both there and then in the center console. They're all haptic feedback. Okay. So you actually have to press them pretty hard. And you kind of it feels like you've pressed it, and then it works. So what I thought there'd be a little bit more light touch, and you've got to give them a real solid push. Which long term I probably appreciate more than a light touch accidentally bumping the climate knobs or stuff like that. I'd rather have a real knob, but
it's a simpler solution.
But
now, when the car is off, are there indentations in the trim where you can see where the temperature control is, or is it just perfectly smooth?
It's nearly perfectly smooth.
Oh, that's very cool then.
Yeah, I think you can kind of see like where the light would shine through.
Gotcha.
But it's almost perfectly smooth. So it takes a little getting used to, again, because I'm usually used to either pressing a button or having something that's really touch sensitive, and they've kind of split the difference with this.
Gotcha.
But it works.
Nice. What is the performance though? Only front wheel drive, right?
So first to market are going to be the front wheel drive cars, which hopefully will be on sale soon-ish.
It's been a little delayed.
All-wheel drive sometime next year. 2 different battery sizes, and then both battery sizes are available with front or all-wheel drive.
Gotcha.
Speaking of those battery sizes, just to kind of get into some specs, thought I had that up right in front of me, but basically the all-wheel drive, both the all-wheel drive and front-wheel drive have the same amount of torque, and horsepower is also sort of nearly the same, especially between batteries. So you're not getting a lot more battery performance. You're not a lot more performance out of the bigger battery. You get more of just the range. The standard battery is usable 63 kilowatt hours,
Mm-hmm.
and the big battery is 87 kilowatt hours. So depending on whether you get front wheel drive or whatever, basically the longest range model should go over 300 miles, 310, 314, somewhere around that. The shortest range model will go about 216 miles, which is about the same as the Leaf Plus. The car that I drove was a Empower Plus, so it's not quite the exact top trim. Front drive, big battery. When I left the hotel, it was indicating 260 miles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably realistically 260, 270 is
These are
where,
competitive, if not great figures.
yeah, they're sort of right in where the segment is right now. So no real complaints there. They've switched to CCS charging for DC fast charging.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a liquid cooled battery, which are two things.
Yay! The Leaf drivers will appreciate that.
Yes. Which, as we know, the Leaf has a good old Chad emo connector, an emo Chad connector.
Carmen's going to have to show that graphic
at some point. Yes, she probably should. But let's sort of get to that charging thing, because this is where it gets a little like, oh, the car was definitely designed a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the world has changed a bit. So the CCS connector is great. It peaks at 130 kilowatts. So not amazing. I mean, way better than a Leaf, but not amazing compared to other vehicles in this segment.
I mean, the Mach-E's been out for a year or two, and it does 155, I think, at this point.
Yeah. So Nissan is claiming a 20 to 80% charge time of 40 minutes at 130 kilowatts.
That seems like a major fail, especially when there are eGMP cars out there that'll do 235.
It's a bit frustrating, because for perspective, if you go look at our charging challenge video with the Ioniq 5, it did 10 to 80% in 18 minutes.
Mm-hmm. This is twice as long, and it's a smaller amount of charge.
Yeah. And battery sizes are similar, so it's mostly lost sort of in that peak charging speed. 40 minutes is a long time.
That is a very long time.
Especially when they're quoting 20 to 80% instead of like a 10 to 80. So we won't know.
10 to 80 is like the industry standard. So for them to slip in the 20 is kind of a little shady. They're hoping people won't notice, maybe.
I don't think it is trying to make the number look better.
Yeah,
for sure. I don't know if it goes as far as shady, but it is, trying to make the number a little bit more competitive. Realistically, it doesn't matter. Very seldom are you DC fast charging the way most people drive today.
Mm-hmm.
And while 40 minutes is a bit of a stretch, like if you were to time your trip to where you're okay, this is where we're going to eat lunch, you're probably okay. But compared to everything else out there, it's a little on the lower side. And when the all-wheel drive starts shipping next year, like that's the biggest demerit that I have to give to the car. I was trying to find things like, what about this car don't I like? What about would make me not want to look at it? Whatever. And it's really the charge speed. That's at the end of the day, biggest
weakness.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it is what it is. And comparatively, it's not as good as some of the other cars. The onboard charger also only peaks at like 7.2 kilowatts, which is actually fine. Most people are going to run a 32 amp, 40 amp, 50 amp charger at home, so they're only going to get that anyway. But for comparison's sake, the upcoming Equinox, will charge at 19.2 kilowatts if you have a big enough. If you have an 80 amp home charger that supports it. So most people aren't. That requires usually a 200 amp panel upgrade and 100 amp dedicated circuit, and
it gets complicated and
nobody's
expensive.
doing them. Yeah, new house builds you'll have it, but there's no reason to really do that now. So perfectly fine. They're claiming 14 hours for 0 to 100% on a level 2.
Okay, I mean that's comparable to anything else.
Yeah, overnight. You're not going to pull in at exactly 0% every single day.
No.
So I think
you'd have to push it in into the garage or carport.
Yeah, so I think 7 or 8 hours. That's pretty industry standard. So
it sounds like the Ariya is For the most part, a very solid product, aside from that DC fast charging.
Better than I thought it would be, actually.
Yeah.
I'd like the Leaf for what it is, but I expected maybe I expected a bigger Leaf, and what I got was an all new car that really looked at what other vehicles are doing in the segment and what their plans were, and really went after them, really attacked what's out there. And
Gotcha.
comparatively speaking, like, if you asked me would I get this over a Mach-E, I would, I think. Just because you have to kind of like want the way the Mach-E looks. And I like how the Mach-E looks, but I think the Ariya looks more elegant, it looks more expensive.
Yeah.
Compared to, let's say, like a Volvo C40. I believe this is a little bit bigger, which would have me kind of drawn more towards the Nissan there. The eGMP cars, that's where it gets a little difficult. Like, the Ariya supports wireless CarPlay and Android Auto, and the eGMP cars don't support it wirelessly.
Which, the more I use it, the less I like a wireless.
Yeah, we actually chatted about that on the program.
As I was like, mentioned.
Yeah, it was.
But that's another story. That
absolutely is. But it does the dynamic route planning, and it does all that preconditioning and stuff for you, and
that's very nice. It sounds like the Ariya was worth the wait, because it is delayed a couple years.
Yes, so. And if I don't mind saying one other thing, because I do believe that this will be important, which is the Ariya. Excuse me. The Ariya is currently built in Japan, so first of the year. Bye tax credit. Bye.
Move that thing to Smyrna.
And nobody will commit. So they've said that 2 electric vehicles will be built in Canton, Mississippi, which is where they currently build Titan. They won't confirm that the Ariya will be built there, but they would be really stupid to not build it there. So they're paying for all those upgrades and renovations and stuff there. They're going to have to build this car here one way or another. Absolutely. Otherwise, the pricing isn't as competitive, because
nobody will buy it.
Yeah. And it starts at 40-ish, and the model that I drove was 55. And it peaks,
that's par for the course these days. So they're right where they need to be on most things. So that's very good news for Nissan.
It is. It is. You may be able to get some. What if people that were remembering, if they remember back to last year when the reservation system opened, the reservation was only open for like 4 or 5 trims, and there's like 6 or 7 different trim options out there. So it is very possible that you'll be able to walk into a dealership and walk out with an Ariya soon. Well,
that's even better news, because it's one thing to offer a new vehicle, but being able to buy it these days is quite quite something else.
Yep, some aren't allocated. So good luck. You might find one.
Definitely. We've got another very interesting EV to talk about coming up here from Honda. But first, I wanted to invite you all to please like and subscribe. It helps us out enormously. You have no idea how much it helps us if you like this video and subscribe to the EV Pulse YouTube channel. You will find all kinds of great content on our channel, from very high quality vehicle reviews to first drives. Chad, I think you've got a first drive video of the Ariya that will be in the works here sooner than later.
There'll be a story. There'll be a story on the website, and we've also we had mentioned I talked about driving the Nero, so that's coming. Yeah, it's also coming very soon.
Yeah. So we got full reviews of vehicles. We've got first drives, and we've got some very interesting features as well. Check out our EV Basics series if you're considering getting an electric car, but you don't really know if it's right for you. That's what this series is all about. It'll explain electric vehicles from the ground up. Very simple to understand, because they can be intimidating. They can be confusing if you've only driven internal combustion your whole life. So the most recent one we did is all about the 80% rule. We talk about what that means and why you need to be aware of it and how you can sort of work around that. So if you haven't, check out EV Basics. Make sure you like and subscribe. We do appreciate that so very much. But another interesting EV. So Nissan's been kind of behind the times with the Ariya. They're finally getting it out, which we're very glad to see. Another Japanese brand is a little bit late to EVs, Honda. But they just showed off a new model. What have we got here, Chad? It's the Prologue.
The Prologue, which should give me an indication that maybe it's their first, maybe it's their guidance. I'm not,
right?
Maybe that's what they were going for with the name was. But the Prologue is Honda's joint operation with our pals at General Motors. So it looks like a Honda on the outside. It's got a Honda GME mismatch interior, and it is running the exact same Ultium platform as the Lyric.
Wow.
So a Honda Lyric. There you go.
Okay. And it looks good. I think this thing looks like a Range Rover, perhaps Evoque or something.
It
I think
has
it's
a little
very
bit,
sharp.
yeah, it has a little bit of that going for it. I can see a little bit of modern Civic or Accord in like the headlights and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely in profile or out of the rear, it looks more expensive than it
Definitely. Maybe a
probably
little
will be.
Volvo in there too.
Yeah, they took some, I think, some really good design cues from some of the competition and put it in here. And you could argue that a lot of modern Hondas aren't exactly pretty or have the best look to them. So
Mm-hmm.
I like what we're seeing here. Obviously, the big news is the Ultium underneath. So
Mm-hmm.
Honda has figured, well, let's get into this EV fray, and we're gonna work with GM, which they've worked with General Motors before. So
Mm-hmm.
there
They
have
used to build
been,
supply engines for, I think it was the Saturn Vue. You could get
yep,
the red line model, I think it was. We get the
yep.
Honda 3.5.
There's also a brief period of time where you could get the Honda Accord and the Acura RLX with OnStar,
Ah,
which was
interesting.
also
I did
great.
not know that.
So, they've worked together. So there's a bat phone or a red phone somewhere at Honda headquarters
Yeah.
that can just ring up Mary Barra and say, "Hello, we need to talk."
Mayor
Um,
Bear, give me some Altium
give
now.
me some
Stat.
Altium now. So if we can make assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
because it is the Lyric powertrain,
Yes,
this will probably be a really good car because
most likely.
I really like the Lyric. The key points on the Lyric is, you get up to around 300 some miles of range with the rear drive, quick charging, 190 kilowatts. I think it peaks at. It's good. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's good, and then I'll have a Honda badge, which will help Honda get into this whole EV game because
And everybody loves Honda because
they're
they're
behind
almost always the best in segment for
the
every vehicle they offer.
power of
So
dreams, right?
exactly.
I think though, like it's interesting because like Mazda, they kind of slung the MX-30 on us, which clearly was just a directive from Japan to, hey, sell this car. We
We
don't
need a
care.
compliance
We
car.
need a compliance car. BZ4X Solterra, that ended up being not the best partnership, I don't think, especially since the wheels were falling off the cars. But
That's kind of a problem.
I guess that's actually fixed now. Maybe
Yeah.
I just saw a news story on it. So, those sorts of partnerships haven't been so great for EVs. So it'll be really interesting to actually drive the Prologue and see.
It should be very good. And this is the first glimpse we're getting of the exterior and the interior.
Yes,
And
yeah,
I really like what I see. Premium exterior design. You get a couple 11-ish inch screens inside the vehicle, one for the digital instrument cluster and, of course, for the touchscreen. And then the design was led by Honda's team in Los Angeles. So
yep,
go Merca.
go, yeah, and I mean that's the thing too. Like it looks like they pulled the best of what General Motors is doing right now in their EVs.
Yeah.
Put the Honda flair on it,
Yeah.
and are going to put it on sale hopefully
Yeah.
soon.
And this vehicle should be, to your point about Lyric based, Ultium based, it should be larger than a CRV. They're saying about the size of a Passport, which is basically a 2-row version of the Pilot. So they're talking a 121.8 inch wheelbase. And the Prologue should launch in North America in 2024. So a year or so out still.
Yeah, well, we're almost at the end of 2022
Yeah.
now. So, I wonder though if it's going to have the Lyrics power door, because it almost has the same, with the image that's up right now, it almost has the same sort of shape,
Mm-hmm.
and but that one like pops down kind of funky.
Yeah.
So who knows if they'll do that here. But one interesting thing here is it is very much Lyric based, but it doesn't seem to have the same rear overhang, like the same sort of rear, like
You
three
shortened it.
quarter, like
Yeah.
it doesn't look quite as elongated back there. So I don't know. I mean, if it is just a Lyric with a Honda badge, I think that's a reasonable win. But if they can add a little bit of, the Honda flair that they've sometimes do, their own
Mm-hmm.
uniqueness or their own quirkiness, they could really have something to offer.
No, I have very high hopes. Honda usually does not screw things up. They have a very good track record of
They
knocking it out of the park.
they have a very good job at that, and and the standard and the bar is pretty low based on Japanese EVs right now.
That's true.
But 2024 puts it right around equinox time. Like that segment is going to be really competitive.
Probably a Mach-E refresh or something.
Mach-E refresh.
Maybe a BRZ refresh.
Hopefully.
BZ4X, pardon me. There's no BR, not the BRZ.
Yeah, I know. Well,
completely wrong product.
Well, maybe refresh on one of those. That's an EV as well.
Maybe. But speaking of EVs, Chad, you've got another very valuable tip of the week for us.
So a lot of our colleagues will, when they write up about EV charging and stuff like that, and even our own EV Basics series had said, oh, when you get an EV, you should download and install the apps for all of the major charging companies, Electrify America, ChargePoint, stuff like that. And you should. It's a good idea. In some cases, you can get a cheaper rate. But a lot of charging stations, especially, all the EA stations have a credit card reader on them, so you don't need to have an Electrify America account to use that. But a lot of ChargePoint stations, some won't have a credit card reader on it, but it'll still read your credit card. Since most credit cards these days have a tap to pay function, or your watch has a tap to pay, you can actually go up to these chargers and activate them without having like a ChargePoint account or an Electrify America account.
Well, that's super helpful to know.
And just pay for the session individually. Now, they don't necessarily like to advertise that, because what Electrify America and ChargePoint EV Go do is they preload your account.
Of course they do.
With $10 or whatever.
Which is super friggin' annoying. So charge my card for the power I took in.
Well, there's money. It's like PlayStation points. Like there's money in them acting like a bank. And not every single time, but a lot of times these stations, even those ChargePoint level 2s that don't have a credit card reader on them, a lot of times you can tap a credit card and it'll work. So give it a shot, maybe.
Your mileage may vary, but it sounds like they're more common than people realize.
Yeah. So you're gonna want, like I said, you're gonna want the app installed for finding stations and making sure they're online and all of that stuff. But if you're someplace new, give it a shot.
Absolutely. That is a very good tip, Chad, because I mean, I didn't even know that. I just assume if there's no card reader, well, you better have the app. Otherwise, you can't charge. So very cool stuff. But very good show. That's about it for this week then. Chad, I do thank you for your help. We thank Carmen, of course, for doing all the back end, the pictures and the sound. That's her job. So, Carmen, we appreciate your efforts. Like and subscribe is always appreciated. And we thank you for watching. So we'll see you next week.